What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Happy Halloween. For those parents with little kids out there, I know this is borderline your Super Bowl. Some of us without kids are forced to watch Aaron Rodgers and the Jets potentially lose another game, and you guys will be out trick or treating, enjoying one of the great holidays. You know, the joy kids get of just powering down mini candies. I know I've slammed probably, I don't know, 100 small Snickers and probably 75 small Reese's in the last 4 or 5 days. And you just justify it like, how many little mini Snickers does it make to actually make a large Snicker bar? And you tell yourself, no, 20, even though it's probably like 6. But that's how you got to do it. So happy Halloween. Enjoy the night. I know kids, big night. Same with Aaron Rodgers. Big night for the Jets. We will dive into that. What's on the line? Something jumped out to me. I saw some numbers for the World Series. Outdrew Monday Night Football. And it just shows us as a very, very simple formula in sports for success and to get our attention, which is harder now than ever to do. And then I thought we just asked 5 big question marks. 5 question marks I have heading into week 9. We got a pretty good slate. We got a lot of interesting matchups, which never determines if it's going to be good or bad on a Sunday. I thought the slate last week sucked on paper, and it was a really entertaining weekend. So it's the best part about football, as the boys say, any given Sunday. So before we dive into that, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app, Game Time. As you saw the Yankee game, Game 5, that fan, who knows, probably used Game Time to attend the game. Turns out he's Gronk's buddy who ripped the ball out of Mookie Betts' hands. He'll never be going back. Looks like he's been banned. I don't know if he's been banned for life. He definitely got banned for Game 5. Pretty hilarious moment. You just never know what you're going to get in sports. Ultimate reality TV. That's why going to a game is so great. You never know. You could see something historic. We've all been at some bad ones, but we've been at ones that you'll never forget. And any parent out there, we just talked about Halloween, those moments you have with your parents, with your dad, if you have a young son or daughter, are things that they remember for a long, long time, the rest of their life, really. So if you get an opportunity and you got some time off Friday, Saturday during the week and want to attend something, an NBA game, an NHL game, obviously football, pro or college, concerts as well. You want to go to a concert, sing some songs. I say this all the time. I don't think I've ever been to a concert and not had a good time. Now, obviously, some acts are better than others, and it's easier to find out now, like who's good live, who's not, because you can just go to YouTube. But historically, you heard rumors, then you see someone live, you're like, whoa. But now you got a pretty good idea. And when you go to a good show, there's nothing quite like it. You have a great time, you get a little tipsy, and enjoy yourself. And this app is so easy to use. Flashpoint deals. It gives you the ability to search by where you can sit, especially for concerts, the angle to the stage, and the exact view. It's great. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I hope some of the Jets, specifically Aaron Rodgers, go to this game wearing just some outrageous costumes. I don't necessarily expect Rodgers to. Remember a couple years ago when he showed up to training camp looking like the dude from Nicolas Cage's character in Con Air? Put the bunny back in the box. He just looked just like, I forget the character's name, but the hair was flowing. He had the outfit going, and he looked perfect. But now he's got short hair, so I don't think he can quite pull that off. But we're forced to watch the Jets again, and that's the reality of them acquiring Aaron Rodgers. And like Aaron even said, that the league told them, you owe us one. So they're on primetime nonstop, and they clearly suck. And I think this night has a chance to really put the nail in the coffin. Obviously, their season's already over. Like this team's not going anywhere. But just in terms to really shake some things up. If they lose to the Texans, which to me, even with the Texans injuries, Nico Collins out, Diggs is out for the season. Their passing game really has struggled the last couple weeks. So Joe Mixon looks really good. Defensively, I think D'Amico, if he gets pressure on Aaron Rodgers, we've seen Aaron ain't moving. And you've seen some quotes coming out from unnamed executives in articles like it's you don't need to be an NFL GM to watch him play and go, this guy's a shell of himself. This guy is nowhere remotely close to what he once was. Welcome to life. I mean, most guys as they age are not Tom Brady. I say this all the time. Most guys, think about Tom Brady's peers. Peyton Manning, his last season, could not throw. I attended the Super Bowl. Actually, is one of my great bets of all time. Had a lot of money on the Broncos as an underdog against the Carolina Panthers. And after the first couple drives, it was a wrap. Like you could tell his arm. And I had seen him earlier that season against the Raiders, and his arm was just as bad. It like didn't work. Roethlisberger by the end was a dink and dunk guy. Drew Brees, same thing. Couldn't throw. Old guys, banged up players aren't the same. Now, like Brady, if Rodgers just standing there, he has an elite arm still, but he can't step into throws anymore. So all of his throws are like back, foot, let it fling. And even when he used to, and listen, historically, Aaron Rodgers isn't exactly the first guy you go to a teach tape on. And I think sometimes Packer fans know this. Jordan Love is like copy and pasted his game, which is a good thing. But sometimes it can get him in a little trouble. Like I haven't charted it, but I would imagine a decent amount of Jordan Love's interceptions, especially over the middle of the field, have been back-footed, like fadeaway Michael Jordan jumper throws, which is not the ideal way to play. It's why guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and even a lot of other guys in that era, Philip Rivers is a good example. Like their arms, Peyton Manning and Philip Rivers didn't have good arms. So they had to be fundamentally sound and step into throws because they had to get as much juice on it as possible. Aaron never had. Aaron always got away. He's like a pitcher. It's like, yeah, I throw 99 miles an hour. So yeah, my breaking ball's not great, but good luck hitting 99. And it turns out in 2024, everyone's throwing, so it's getting a little easier to hit. But you know what I mean. And you watch Rodgers, and in one way, it's like, yeah, it kind of sucks seeing great players get old, but like, welcome to sports. And I get there are a couple outliers. I mean, like the way LeBron looks. I mean, he was the best player on our Olympic team. The way Brady looked, 43, 44 years old, those are not normal situations. And we cannot get used to that. And the expectation for these guys should not be that. And I think we're learning that with Aaron. Even if his team was better and his offensive line was better, he would still be nowhere near what he was 3 or 4 years ago. Remember his last year in Green Bay? There were some kinks in the armor that year. And that's way before his Achilles ripped. So, like, yeah, this year has been a disaster. I also think I've seen some takes, guys like Mike Greenberg. This is the most historic, uh, like, failure in the history of sports. I got to call bullshit on that. Not because it's not a failure. It clearly is. They spent a lot of money. They traded for a bunch of guys. They got a bunch of high, valued names and a lot of high priced guys. I mean, Rodgers should be making what, 45, 50 a year, but he gave him a big pay cut. Obviously, Devontae signed one of the biggest contracts in the history of the sport at his position a couple years ago. All these guys got traded for first round picks, but this team has sucked for a long period of time. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have I'm not pretty sure, I know they have the longest standing playoff drought in American pro sports. Like, that's not nothing. I mean, we're going on like 15 years now. So I would argue that like last year, the Dallas Cowboys, who have been good, losing at home as a big favorite to the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love was a way bigger failure, getting their ass kicked. I'd argue the Baltimore Ravens getting a home game, also favored against Patrick Mahomes, whose team only scored 17 points. If I had told you at the beginning of the playoffs, like, the wild card round, that it's going to be Ravens Chiefs and the Chiefs are only going to score 17 points. That's all you know. The line's going to be the same. There is no way, even if you're not a gambler, you wouldn't be like, hey, what's a DraftKings account? Like, I'm putting a lot of money on that. That's an epic failure, right? The Jets have been a disaster because we talk about them so much, but like this team has sucked for a long period of time. And these guys together haven't won crap. Part of, what makes football to me, why I love it so much, is because it brings everything into play, right? Obviously, tangible, like the skills, like you got to have it. You need high end players, but unlike baseball, coaching really matters. Every single play, every single position. Uh, Chemistry and unity as a group matters a lot. I would also say intangible stuff. Like ultimately, if Aaron Judge is hitting or not hitting, and I'm recording this before Game 5, it has nothing to do with like his intangibles or his toughness or whatever. He just not seeing the ball very well right now. Lost his confidence, right? Like a huge part of football, like the Washington Commanders aren't exactly, I don't know, the 94 Cowboys from a roster standpoint. No one's going to get it confused with some of the great teams we've ever seen, even if they end up winning 12 games. But I would imagine if you got Adam Peters or Dan Quinn on the phone and said, describe this team to me, separate from the quarterback, and obviously Terry McLaurin's a really good player, but they got a lot of guys that like our work ethic, our toughness, our football IQ, our willingness to do whatever it takes Monday through Saturday is through the roof. It's the buy-in has been crazy. Like in baseball, do you need a buy-in? Like in basketball, like you either can shoot threes or you can't. Like Russell Westbrook's trying. He can't hit water from a boat if he was in the middle of the ocean. That's just welcome to a guy that can't shoot, right? Where in football, there are a lot of guys like, yeah, he's kind of slow footed. He doesn't have the longest arms, but it's like he's the toughest MFer on our team. And when you look at the Jets, it's like, yeah, Tyron Smith used to be good. He's not good anymore, right? A lot of hype on some of the young players that's like, yeah, Sauce Gardner's not playing very well. Their coaching staff is abomination, but their quarterback just isn't nearly as good as he once was. And we've talked a lot about this, like, the leadership, I mean, from Peyton Manning and Tom Brady is just elite. Their drive and their standards for their teammates are like they might as well be Nick Saban, but with a helmet and football pads. Like those guys are even outliers. Like no one would confuse Roethlisberger's leadership as being like all time great, but for a lot of his career, it's like yeah, this guy's one of the most I don't know unique players we've ever seen. Wait, this guy's 6'6", 270, huge arm, tough as shit, hard to bring down. And then as he lost it, as he got older, he just wasn't quite the same. And when you lose as a quarterback, the one thing Ben had is like, the culture and the team, so they could still be really competitive. They had Mike Tomlin. You look at the Jets, it's like, okay, Rodgers lost it. Clearly can't save the team. I saw Colin went on a thing on his TV radio show. I guess more of a TV show now, podcast, is the way I usually consume, or YouTube TV. It's like saviors don't exist. And I would say sometimes they do if you get like an all-time great player. Like Andrew Luck, if you put him on most teams, like he's going to have a savior element to him. I mean, that Colts team was not very good. But like a 40-year-old coming off an Achilles, yeah, he's got no chance. In a league, it's like, yeah, it's softer than ever, but there's never been more speed on the field. All these defensive coordinators are getting paid a boatload of money to figure you out. And it's like, oh, yeah, you can't run. So it's like, wait, one of your main strengths that made you a great player is just completely gone. And it's why tomorrow night, like, I expect this. Like, I'm not betting this game because it does feel like everyone thinks they're going to lose and then they end up winning. It's a short week at home. But, like, if they do lose, I feel pretty confident. Like, the general manager is probably fired on Friday. Now, the GM's contract is over at the end of the season. I think the writing's on the wall. It's not like he's getting a contract extension. I mentioned this yesterday. I don't think it would be the craziest thing you've ever heard if Woody Johnson pulled a Jim Irsay, but instead of Jeff Saturday, got an ESPN guy that knows how to coach. We mentioned Rex Ryan, why it makes a lot of sense to be the next head coach of the Jets. If you tell me they lose, like why not just bring him in Saturday or Sunday? Have him start coaching the team on Monday. Like he'd clearly do it. He'd drop everything in a heartbeat and come back. If you're the Jets, like what's the point of just rolling this out with Jeff Ulbrich, who is like, you've had a couple weeks. Clearly, he ain't the answer. And you have greatly diminished his one strength, which was just focusing on the defense. So wouldn't it make sense just to fire the GM and to ask? And then who knows? Maybe Rex is like, I don't want the midseason stink. I'll definitely interview, but my guess is the way Rex has talked about it, I think he'd show up immediately and just almost give you a trial run. And my expectations is like, just can you get the train back on the tracks? Can you get us just pointed in the right direction? Can you take this corner that everyone said was the greatest thing since sliced bread? Who I've always thought Sauce was a little overrated, but he was a high end Pro Bowl level player, is playing like an undrafted free agent. That's what a scout told me the other day. Like, throwing his tape, he looks atrocious. Now, is he banged up? I don't know. But like, that would not fly. The one thing with Rex is like the culture and the effort, like, there are non-negotiables. Well, what happens when you bring in a substitute teacher? Like, you usually screw around. Back in the day when I got a substitute teacher, we used to have in the 90s those roll-in televisions with the VHS. You usually like watch a movie and everyone was just dicking around, whether it was elementary school, junior high, or high school. And I think sometimes we always talk about the boost of the interim coach. I think most consistent theme is, yeah, maybe a game, and then it usually resorts back to what it was, and a lot of times worse. And usually the guy's an interim coach for a reason. The team's in shambles, and there's not much he can do if he's not some future coaching star. So, like, from what I've heard, and it's pretty clear, they thought this guy had head coaching upside. And listen, maybe he does. Maybe he should go to college or something, but he's just completely over his head. The first several weeks, I mean, losing that game last week is an embarrassment. So I think everything would be on the table if they lose at home with a bunch of people. And here's what someone told me. When you lose like this, like that Patriot game, the negative energy coming in on Halloween night, people wearing costumes, I would imagine a lot of sarcastic costumes toward the Jets. And if you have a bad night as a primetime game, I just think the owner's going to do something. I mean, he's already shown that he's a pretty inconsistent guy, right? Just in terms of his messaging, his actions. So buckle up if you're a Jets fan. And honestly, like, would anyone complain if you just said, yeah, Rex Ryan started coaching on Monday? Like, because if they lose, like, okay, you're 2-7, you're completely done. No one wants to speak about you. But that would keep me entertained. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how to shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA Profit Boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost. If that player leads the league that night in points, plus rebounds, plus assists, you win a share of $1 million in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings app and use code JOHN. That's code JOHN to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings. Crown is yours. I saw some numbers come out on the old interweb that the World Series outdrew Monday Night Football. Now, both these numbers, Monday Night Football usually does between 12 and 15 million people. I mean, sometimes big game as the season goes on could be much higher. But like, you're doing 13 to 15 million people. For example, the NBA Finals last year was doing like 9-10 million people. That's what's done the last couple of years. So these are enormous numbers. The baseball game did like 14 million plus. And this World Series has been huge. I mean, the ratings have been just astronomical relative to what the baseball, just the vibe in the World Series has become in terms of interest. It's clear. I mean, you get the two biggest brands in the sport. The Yankees probably have one of the biggest fan bases, all of American sports, even football. So, I mean, I would imagine just the quantity of their fans probably isn't that far behind like the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, if you just did, are you a Yankee fan? All over the world. But I do think it shows us, like, we talk a lot about football, its greatest strength. It's easy to consume. The overwhelming majority of human beings do not work on Sunday. The games once a week for 2.5, 3 hours. It's easy to follow your team. You don't have to change your lifestyle very much. And if your team happens to play on Monday Night Football, it's usually after work, so you're able to watch it. It's just a very, very easy sport for a fan to watch the games. And then the games mean more, right? You play once a week. And the one thing clearly with baseball, you play every day. Even Maria last night, game four was on. She's like, wait, the World Series on again? I'm like, yes, baseball. You play, there's no, the only off day would be to travel. Like if you're in the same city, you play back to back, you just play all the time, right? Even in the World Series, I'm like, yeah, this is the way it works. Like this isn't the NBA finals where you have a couple days off. Like this is, you are playing. And let's face it, like I'm a good example. I would say I'm on the high end of sports fans. Just the amount when I was a kid that I consumed and I watched through my 20s. I've dedicated my life to working in the business. And I don't think if you count from game one to game 162, I watched more than a total of 9 innings of baseball. Now, part of that is I no longer live in the market in which the team I root for plays in. But the Giants are so bad, even if I did, I wouldn't watch them. They're not good enough for me even to think about like getting the package. And like during the offseason, like I'm just not watching Sunday Night Baseball. But a huge part of the culture we live in is like football became something that everyone wants to be involved in. And I think college football has benefited from that too. Is it like, whoa, I got to watch this game? And it's become a huge event. I think TV shows benefit from this, right? Obviously, social media, if you haven't watched a show and your friends talk about it, you see stuff online and it feels like a big deal, you feel like you're missing out. So you're like, what's this Penguin show? Wait, Colin Farrell's doing what? All these people are talking about it? I got to check it out. And then you watch it. And that's how, to me, TV shows in 2024 become really big. It's kind of word of mouth and the power of social media. Now, if you don't like the show after a couple episodes, you might not keep watching. But I'd say for the most part, most of the big shows kind of spread that way. You don't want to feel like you're missing out. I'm not a big sci-fi. I don't even know if Game of Thrones falls under that, right? But the dragons, just kind of that world is not for me. But I felt like everyone was watching Game of Thrones. So I was like, I watched it. I didn't like it that much. It didn't do that much for me. Besides, like, I'm in. You give me nudity, you give me some sex, and you give me people getting killed. Like, I can watch, no problem. But I watched because I didn't want to feel like I was missing out. And football holds that part of our lives right now. I think the reason the NBA has lost, half of its viewership over the last decade is like you can't have the teams and the players tell you they don't care about the games and expect the consumer then to care. And when you lose them throughout the year, like you better have the perfect combination. Like baseball has lost that. And if this was Padres versus the Guardians, these numbers would probably be 5-6 million people watching. But you give me Yankees, you give me Dodgers, it feels big. I have not missed a pitch. I'm trying to bang this out right now so I can go watch the game here in about 45 minutes. And I think that's cool. And it's one thing that we still share in common. It's why my love of football, I love just running into people and then eventually talking about football. It's a great communal experience. And I say it all the time, like my crossover in the golfing world, I would say most times when I play golf with people that I do not know, football is brought up within the first couple holes. And once we kind of level out what I do or what team they root for, becomes a consistent theme throughout the 18 holes that we play. And that's just not true for the other sports, I would say consistently, because they're not an event that we all share anymore. And obviously there are a lot more people, in the world than 13 or 4 or America, 13, 14 million people. But I do think just a lot of people casually, and that's really benefited the NFL, is like they've had an enormous increase in women watching. And I think one way, and I think a lot of these women are people's girlfriends and wives, and because they don't want to feel like they're missing out, because it feels bigger than maybe it did 15, 20, 30 years ago, because it's true. And they've marketed that way, and it's kind of worked, especially relative to the other sports. So I'm very fortunate. Like, I can't imagine, like, when I did a daily radio show, I had to watch every baseball game. I watched every basketball game. And half the time I was like, I don't even care that much. But you got to do your job. You got to, know what you're talking about. And I don't have to do that anymore. So to get me to watch something that I'm not going to talk about on this podcast, like it's got to be really, really good and really, really interesting. And I think the World Series this year with the Yankees and Dodgers has captured that. And it's been really cool. I mean, that moment of that fan ripping the ball out of Mookie Betts' glove is some of the funniest shit I've ever seen. On a serious note, for a split second, you're like, bro, is he going to hurt his wrist? Because that would have been bad. But obviously, no one got injured. Like, it was hilarious. Like, that is like, obviously, the guy's insane to even have that idea. I saw Rob Gronkowski said he went to college with this guy at Arizona. He was on the hockey team. He's like, that dude's insane. And this is Gronk saying that. So I just, it's had some fun moments. It really has. It's kind of got me back into baseball. Uh, let's do 5 big question marks as we head into week 9. I thought we'd just do this just a way to kind of talk about some of the big things this weekend. Just things that I was kind of fired up on. Uh, let's start with this one because, listen, I'm in the business of talking football. You got to include the Cowboys sometimes. I do think it's interesting. Like, are the Cowboys really just going to suck? Like, listen, anyone that wants to push back and say they get talked about too much, I understand where you're coming from. But at least the last 3 years, they've been a 12-win team. They've won the division twice. Like, they've been a real tangible story. Are they really headed towards 6 or 7 wins? Like, because that's what it kind of feels like right now. They're playing the Falcons, who have won 4 of their last 5 games. I saw before I pressed record, Cousins was just named Offensive Player of the Week. I think what he threw 4 touchdowns. Talk about the polar opposite of 2 guys that tore their Achilles last year. And Rodgers did it in game 1. Cousins did it in November. And Cousins now looks fantastic. But remember, Cousins is a couple years younger. And here's the other thing. Cousins' game's not predicated on running around. Cousins ain't throwing from the back foot. Cousins, if his Cousins' arm's fine, he plays, I'm not saying he's these guys, but his style is Manning, Brady. He's sitting in the pocket, stepping in and throws. No running because he can't run. No ad-libbing off because if you pressure him, it's over, kind of with Goff. Those guys are stepping the throws, deliver the ball. So their fundamentals have to be elite for them to play well. And you're watching Cousins, you're like, God, he just looks good again. He just looks like a normal, good player. And Aaron Rodgers, which is weird to say about one of the best quarterbacks of all time, like, not Mr. Fundamental, And you watch Cousins and slicing and dicing. This Dallas defense sucks. Cool moment. I saw Diggs, who went at it with that reporter about the tweet. They shared a laugh today. I also think it's fair because I watched the full video spliced up with the one today of them kind of laughing. If you haven't seen it, Google Trayvon Diggs and the reporter. I do think after a game, when you're getting your ass kicked, like, emotions are pretty high. Like, if I'm mad and something happens, like, if something bad happens to you for the next, I don't know, 30 minutes, hour before you can either walk it off or kind of give a little time, like, you're going to be hot. Like, I do understand guys after a game, even if it's like the first thing you do is check your phone. Yeah, I mean, I could be critical of that. I do the same shit. So do most people listening. Like, the phone kind of lives in our hand. So is it that crazy that he walks in the locker room after losing another game that he checks his phone? Like, yeah, well, welcome to 2024. But you lose this game, which they're an underdog. And I don't think most people are confident Dallas is winning this thing. All of a sudden, it's like you're 3-5. Then you play the Eagles. Are you just headed for a disaster? Is it going to get bad enough where Jerry knows Mike is not coming back and, like, fires him in the middle of the season or fires him around Thanksgiving? I think everything's on the table if they lose this game, because then they would, assuming Philly handles Jacksonville, be a pretty big underdog at home. Uh, the other thing for Atlanta in this game, they win it. Tampa's going to Kansas City on Monday night. This division, because my Saints are dead, could be over pretty quick. I saw on Pro Football Talk today that the Bills technically can clinch the division if all goes right by week 11. I don't know the math here on Atlanta, but week 12, 13, it could be a wrap, and they could just be playing for seeding. So this is the tough team to play. Now, Atlanta can't really rush the passer, but offensively, they got some horses. And I can see Bijan Robinson. If you play daily fantasy, if you want to gamble on some touchdowns for a game, that might be a good game to dabble on Bijan having a big day. Number 2, I think this is a question that your guess is as good as mine, but I'm pretty fascinated to watch this game. How will the Chicago Bears respond? That has to be one of the biggest kick in the dick losses you will ever see. Listen, you lose on a Hail Mary. There's probably nothing worse in football. Like, listen, a lot of guys game winning field goals. When the other team's lining up for a field goal, you got a pretty good idea. Depending, I somehow my algorithm on YouTube, I watched an Al Davis video, and now I've been getting a bunch. And I got put the video of the day that he fired Lane Kiffin, and he had the overhead projector. And last night, I ended up watching like 45 minutes of it. I don't know, talk about having no life. But I'd forgotten when Lane Kiffin rolled out Sebastian Janikowski for a 75-yard field goal. Obviously, it wasn't even close to being made, and Seabass had a big leg. But like, I would say anything inside 50, for the most part, if you're on the sideline or you're a fan, you are expecting to lose. Now, guys clearly miss field goals. You are not expecting to lose on a Hail Mary. And everything that happened after that with the video with Tyreek Stevenson, how critical everyone's been with the coaching staff, because let's face it, they've been pretty shitty. You're coming to Arizona, who's 4-4, who has shown they've been down in games and come back. They are very difficult to play. There are going to be a lot of Bears fans there. If you're like down 10-0 after the first quarter, are you getting booed? I think this game to me is all about Eberflus and the staff. If they have any shot of keeping this job, like, this is a must-win game. If the Bears want to sniff the wild card, which might be dead after that game on the Commanders when you look at their schedule, this is a must-win. This is a must-win. And I kind of like Arizona, but Arizona also makes me nervous because I bet on them and they've laid eggs, so they're kind of a stay away. But I think this thing could get weird, and this thing could get weird fast because Caleb's a rookie and he's not playing that well. So it's not like, hey guys, get on. He can't look at them like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but get on my back, fellas. I got us this week. I'll light these guys up like a Christmas tree. He's very dependent on his coordinator and his head coach. I saw today Montez Sweat missed practice, who he was awesome last week. Like, how's this team going to look? Because to me, I don't think there's much middle ground. They're either going to respond and have a chip on their shoulder and look good. They are the better team than the Arizona Cardinals. They should win this game, or they might melt. And to me, if they melt this game, it could kind of unravel. And those games against the Packers and those games against the Lions could get ugly. So I'm fascinated by this matchup. Number 3, is Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams back? Because if I would have told you 3 weeks ago that the Rams were playing Seattle in Seattle, what's the line? I think it would have been Seattle -5, -6, obviously factoring in the injuries and the way the two teams are playing. Now you watch Seattle, who looks like shit. I saw they asked Mike McDonald today if about Halloween. He's like, I don't really like Halloween. And then he laughed and he said, I dressed up for Bill Belichick one year, but Belichick probably wouldn't like that because of the way our defense is playing. And then you get the Rams, who are coming off a mini bye, right? Because they played on Thursday night. They get those two guys back. Their offense looks dramatically better. Obviously, I mean, Puka Nacua is one of the best receivers in the league. Cooper's still a solid player. It opens up their run game. Their defense is solid. We'll have to, if DK plays or not, it's a pretty big deal for Seattle. But these guys used to play in just great games when Pete and Russ were there. But I feel like I could see the Rams win this game by 10 plus. I mean, if they're going to play like they did last week, rejuvenated, refreshed, and just explosive on offense, all of a sudden, I'm telling you, you're going to look up, if you look at the Rams schedule, and they're going to be like 6-4 or 7-5. And you're like, wasn't this team like 1-4? Like, yeah. And then they got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back, and they still got Matt Stafford. I do think, how do I want to frame this? Are we on a collision course for Philly and Washington? I looked today. 11-14. So that's basically in, you know, 2 weeks. The Eagles play the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. So Washington this week plays the Giants in New York, like the commies there. Then they get Pittsburgh at home, which is going to be a tough game. The Eagles host the Jags, big 7.5 point favorite. And then they go to Dallas. These two teams have the same record right now. As long as they both win one of these next two games and neither team gets swept, that game is massive. That will be easily the best Thursday night game of the year in terms of momentum going in. So this Commander story really is pretty incredible. What Dan Quinn, Adam Peters signing just kind of, lower name guys that weren't as sexy, just depth players for other teams. And you just watch them play. They just look solid. Obviously, their quarterback has been pretty freaking good. And I just feel like their defense is overachieving. And to me, you have to look at Dan Quinn for that. So are we on a collision course? And I don't think Philly, is I think Philly is the better team, like roster wise, way better actually. But I thought the same thing about the Bears and Eberflus. Say this, like if you were just comparing Eberflus to Sirianni, now I think the Eagles team is obviously better than the Bears. But you would go, here's what I say about Eberflus. Would I want him as my head coach? Of course not. He is a really good defensive coordinator. Like he is good at that. Sirianni is like, well, I don't even know. Kellen Moore and Jalen have settled down, and their defense has got pressure, which Sirianni has nothing to do with. So that is always the swing here. Like I would take Dan Quinn over Sirianni, and that could be an equalizer, even if a team does have more talent. But I looking at the schedule, I was kind of like, I'm kind of excited for that game already. And then my fifth. Will Green Bay and Detroit live up to the hype? Obviously, Jordan Love is injured. And he said today that, the plan is he's optimistic. He thinks he can play. Now, he's probably not going to be able to practice all week. And he's like, yeah, it's clearly not ideal to play in a game, especially a big one, when you don't practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. But like sometimes the cookie crumbles that way, right? If you're injured. Could Green Bay win this game with Malik Willis? I think it's fair to say no, right? That would be like LaFleur's crowning achievement. If he were to beat the Lions with Malik Willis, you could argue that's more impressive than like resurrecting Rodgers. Like, well, resurrected Rodgers, like it's like resurrecting, an all-time great player. That's impressive, but beating the Lions with Malik Willis, they're a big underdog at home, which was a number that jumped out to me right away when I just looked at the board yesterday. It's like, I know there's some question marks with this quarterback, but you're telling me you're getting LaFleur plus 3.5 at home. I saw a stat today, like as a dog, he's like 17-4 in situations of over a field goal. So he's covering the spread. Like LaFleur's got a little Tomlin to him when you want to bet against the Packers in some of these regular season games. Everyone, Goff hurt his ankle last week, didn't practice on Wednesday, but looks like he's going to practice on Thursday. I mean, they just won a game where he threw for 85 yards and they scored 52 points, which I don't expect them to do with the Packers, but this is a freaking awesome game. Who would have thought 2 years ago when Jared Goff outplayed Aaron Rodgers on Sunday Night Football and knocked the Green Bay Packers out of the playoffs, and with the last game that Aaron Rodgers ever played for the Green Bay Packers, would a couple years later we'd be looking back and they'd be this good? Now, part of that is they've nailed some draft picks. Some of the players that were already on their team are even better. Obviously, Goff has only improved, but it's the cool part about the NFL is it's pretty clear as the season goes, like this is a big time matchup. And sometimes games, I remember I was so excited. Everyone in my life, I have so many Niner people in my life. Niners, Ravens, Christmas night. It was like, God, this is badass. And then the Niners got housed. You're like, that sucked. We've been waiting all week. Everyone's been talking about this Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. And then you watch, you're like, this can't really be happening. It's like, yeah, it's sports. You just never quite know. And sometimes you get this moments like, this is badass. It's happened a lot with the Chiefs in the playoffs. They've played in just some great games. I hope this game lives up to the hype. And I hope Green Bay, however their quarterback situation plays out, that LaFleur can have another Picasso type moment and give his team a chance. Because if Malik Willis plays and they lose by multiple touchdowns, I don't think anyone will really be that critical of the Packers. If Love plays and he's compromised, I kind of think the same thing. But if he's playing and looking good physically, I just hope the Packer defense can just come to play and we can get a real good game because this could be it's definitely on the table of an NFC championship, of a divisional round. Like we're probably getting these teams playing depending on how the seeding shakes out because only one team can win the division. These teams playing 3 times. And even without seeing the matchup yet this year, sign me up for that. Adios, everybody.